Hello, and welcome back to the Two Butts and Crew podcast. My name is Glenn, and I'm joined by honorary crew member Nathan Blake of Nathan Blake Games.
Howdy-ho, everyone.
So today we have a double feature. We are going to be talking about not just one, but two Sonic the Hedgehog movies.
Hedges? Hedgehogs? I don't know.
Hodgepodge? Sonic the Hodgepodge. That's how we describe the entire series.
I agree.
It's just everything is just such a mess with Sonic, but that's part of the reason why we love him. You know, he's like a child star from the 90s, really, if you think about it.
Absolutely, in pretty much every conceivable way.
But yeah, we're here to talk about the Paramount Sonic the Hedgehog movies. Somewhat belatedly, but, you know, better late than never, right?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, maybe this can be in preparation for a third one. You know, kind of split the difference between when the second one came out and when the third one will eventually, maybe.
Yeah. I think there's going to be a third one, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So, first of all, we usually talk about our history with a series, but in this case, we're not really... You know, it doesn't really seem right to talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog game series, so instead, let's talk about the history of Sonic adaptations to film and animation and the like. So, Sonic has a very long, storied history with animation. It's going all the way back to the very early days in the 90s. So, I think the first one was The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. The one with Scratch and Grounder and Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is the first one, and I only got to see little bits of that growing up.
I watched a lot of that growing up, mostly from rental stores, though there was a period where I found out what channel it came on, but it was one of those things that by the time I got to it, you have to wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning to watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember some days waking up super early whenever I was like sick or something and ending up watching a couple episodes here or there. But I also think that maybe my mom didn't like it very much, probably because Sonic was kind of a butt.
Yeah, it definitely, Sonic was very, they leaned in kind of the mischievous rascal aspect of Sonic, and I think it took a lot of inspiration from Looney Tunes, but the more nonsensical parts of Looney Tunes, like the whole thing was just utterly bizarre and operated on the fringes of cartoon logic.
Yeah, absolutely. They had the whole Toon Force thing going on in that a lot of times, like Woody the Woodpecker or something like that.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's less Bugs Bunny and more Woody the Woodpecker. You know, it's kind of more of a... What is Woody the Woodpecker? Is that like a Tex Avery? No, Tex Avery was a director, so he worked on a lot of different things. It's not fair to just attribute him to one character. But yeah, it definitely was the wackier side of things.
Right.
But after that, and if I recall correctly, Saturday morning... is I think what that's supposed to be an abbreviation of. Sad AM was the other Sonic series from the 90s. Well, I think there may have been one more, but I have no experience with it. And that one was much more serious. It was more like a serialized story where I think some of it was episodic and I think some of the stories led into each other. Again, that was something I have never seen that one on TV. I only knew it through rental stores. So there's like this whole, and you can only watch the VHSs that they have at the store, and typically they only had like 2 or 3.
Right, and not always with those sorts of things were they even linear episodes on a tape sometimes. When you were getting chunks of a show from the video rental place, sometimes it was just like, here's like a collection that goes over like key moments or something, so you didn't even necessarily...
Or it's like the episodes are a particular theme. But anyway, I've never seen that one. That one, both of them have their fans, but I think the Sad AM has a much stronger nostalgia, and I think that's, well, one, because it was kind of more hardcore, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that it was very closely tied and basically continued by the Archie comic series.
Right, which is really where most of the hardcore Sonic lore really comes from, as the games only have, generally speaking, like, loosely tied together themes. The Archie comic stuff is like, is where you get, if you're interested in an actual story of Sonic, that's probably where you're going to get the longest running story of Sonic.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. It's not canon to the games, but it's, if you're into like just weird comic book shenanigans where it's just like kudzu, it gets all over the place, then yeah.
Yeah, just nonsense, over the top, like crazy powerful shenanigans where it's just like when we were watching, I think it was the first one, I was watching it more recently with Emily. She was like, wow, that's ridiculous. And I was like, oh, this has nothing on Archie Sonic. Like,
so the next one is Sonic Underground. And I've never seen this. I've only ever seen snippets from advertisements and stuff.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I ever saw anything about Sonic Underground. I didn't recognize that one on the list, honestly.
It's the one where Sonic is like a displaced prince or something. He has two siblings and they're in a rock band.
Oh, yeah. I do barely remember that. I probably saw a couple episodes, but it's just weird looking, and I was not very... It looked gross, honestly, like the artwork, and so I don't think I was interested in it.
Yeah, and I have the same opinion. For some reason, the way they draw Sonic's proportions or something is just ugh.
Yeah.
It's very off-brand.
Maybe that's part of what they were kind of he's a little bit spikier, and obviously the green one is super spiky. Maybe they were kind of referencing that in Sonic 2 when he was doing the different hairstyles. But anyway, we'll get to that eventually too.
Yeah. So these are all American productions. There was also the Sonic original video animation, that's OVA, or when I was young, OVA, as I called them.
Right. And those are usually just single one-shot episodes of anime, essentially.
Yeah.
For the uninitiated.
But it was a Japanese production, and I don't know a ton about its production history, but I have heard that it was originally intended to be a pilot for a potential anime series, though I don't know how true that is. That may just be one of those things that someone said on the internet and everyone latched onto it because they like the idea of a Toei Sonic the Hedgehog series.
I had heard that as well, and really at the end of the day, it makes some sense that Sega, Japanese company, may want to take their most famous guy for their game console and make an anime out of him. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the OVA had been extremely successful, especially in America. They probably would have been let's go ahead and make a whole show out of this.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about Sonic the Hedgehog is Sonic has always been a very American franchise despite being a Japanese property, and which is probably why most of these adaptations are American. I mean, right. For instance, I think Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the video game, not the movie. I feel bad now that I have to specify that. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis was actually developed by Sega of America.
Right, and, even just his whole personality, especially as you got into these TV shows that we're talking about, was a very much more American, sort of personality type, and, the references that he would make and stuff, even though he's a Japanese character first and foremost. But as he kind of evolved into more of a character beyond just fast blue hedgehog that jumps on things from the video games, and you got to later video games that had more story and stuff, his whole eating chili dogs and even just the kind of places he was in, they always felt more American in their style than Japanese.
Yeah, and that's actually, we could go into a whole discussion about Sonic's portrayal. I think I think Sonic's current personality of just being kind of this wandering nice guy is largely more of the Japanese influence kind of creeping in.
Certainly, yeah. I
say creeping in, like, it's World War II and we're worried about Japanese spies.
Yeah, but yeah, back in the 80s, a lot of anime and stuff back then were about kind of the hero that just kind of blows into town and rescues some people and then moves on. That happened a whole lot.
And I mean, we have our own version of that, but it looks different.
Yeah, ours are mostly cowboys, actually. But I wouldn't be surprised if our cowboys kind of inspired that sort of movement in some of the anime. Okay,
well, speaking of anime, so the OVA was probably the most accurate depiction of Sonic the Hedgehog, at least to the games, both in terms of appearance and tone and just the visual style of the world and how it all behaved.
And abilities, probably, I would say.
Yeah, and abilities, and it had Knuckles in it, and he had a hat. We have no idea to this day. I have no idea what the hat was about, but
we don't know what the ascots in Sonic Boom are about either, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but the OVA is, again, it's much beloved, and for good reason. I watched that one a lot as a kid. Did you watch that one growing up?
I had seen it at some point, but I don't remember much about it, to be entirely honest.
Yeah. That was where I was introduced to the concept of Metal Sonic, and I didn't realize until later that there was a whole Sonic CD with Metal Sonic. But it's pretty good. It's just kind of it originally was marketed as Sonic the Hedgehog the movie here in the States, so that may cause some confusion if you're trying to look it up.
But now that we're here with Sonic the Hedgehog the movie and Sonic the Hedgehog the movie 2.
So after that, I don't think that I think there was kind of a period where there weren't any adaptations, and then there was Sonic X. For this one showed up on, I guess it was originally Foxbox, it was Foxbox. They hadn't rebranded to 4Kids by that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the one that I probably had the most experience out of all of these. I watched a lot of it, and it was, one of those Saturday morning cartoons that you could catch, and enjoyed it a lot. I feel like, and it probably was other than the OVA.
It probably is the most accurate to the games because it actually adapts all of the games to to animation. And there's it's interesting. It kind of starts off as its own thing, and then it adapts the games and some of the later seasons, and then it goes back to being its own. I think its own thing. I think it may have been drawing some inspiration from Sonic Shuffle of all games. In that last one, which was just this weird space opera, and I don't know. So I have mixed feelings about this one. On one hand, it was really cool getting to see all the games adapted to, or all the games that I grew up playing. Don't get me wrong, I played the Genesis games growing up, but the adventure games, that's really when I had my own income and I could buy my own games.
Yeah, and we came, even though we were technically alive for the Genesis days, it wasn't when we were fully formed in our ability to really play games and understand them and really be this is my thing. Whereas by the time the adventure games came around, you and I were both around the age that it's pretty formative by that point. It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really cool to see those adapted into animation, but at the same time, Sonic X also it feels really cheap and really hokey, and it's one of those things where as a kid you can kind of look past it, but and it introduced the 4Kids voice cast, which is very controversial in Sonic circles. Except Mike Pollock. Everybody loves Mike Pollock.
It's certainly one of those things where looking back, you can tell exactly what was going on, which was, Fox or whatever company was originally producing it was hey, we've got all of these cool kid shows and these animes and stuff that we brought over that we're showing kids on Saturday mornings, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that. Let's try to accomplish something like that with a character that they all know, and, you know, probably didn't put that much time and money into it, honestly. Yeah. And so you got a pretty, you know, standard...
Sonic X, I think, was originally a Japanese production.
Oh, really? Was it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
I didn't realize that about X.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that about X, but, yeah, so... And then, you know, there might have been a little more heart to it than that, but definitely you could tell that it was trying to be a show in a similar vein to a lot of those other hokey Saturday morning cartoons, as opposed to being like a at all serious show.
Yeah.
And you know, probably they didn't spend a lot of time and money on each episode.
Yeah. And then lastly is Sonic Boom, which appeared on Cartoon Network. And I've only seen a few episodes of this, but you know, it's a very different take on Sonic. It's much more comedic in nature, but I honestly thought it was a witty, well-written show. It's kind of reminded me of Sonic the Hedgehog meets The Amazing World of Gumball, but without Gumball's craziness.
Yeah, the little bit that I have seen of it, like, I don't like the visuals very much, but that's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. But there were some very witty one-liners and stuff that got thrown out by characters, and it was enjoyable, like better than I would have thought it was, honestly.
Yeah, but that was kind of the point where I wasn't watching television much anymore, so...
Yeah.
Just didn't have a whole lot of time with it. And I do believe there's going to be, is it like a Netflix or an Amazon Prime show that's going to be coming out sometime in the next year that's like Sonic Multiverses or something?
I actually haven't heard very much about that, so I'm not sure who's making it or anything.
Yeah, so I don't know a whole lot about that. Obviously, I haven't seen it. If it's out, I don't think it is. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of turned off by the multiverse thing because everything is multiverse now, and it's like, yeah, having, you know, it's one of those things where the concept was kind of smart back 15 years ago when it's like, okay, we have like a million different versions of this character and we've had all these alternate universe takes on them. Why don't we just like have all of them meet each other? You know, that's kind of a cool concept, or it was 15 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was a great excuse in the 80s in comics to explain why there were different versions of different characters and stuff and being written in different ways. And they really capitalized on it in comics then, and then that made its way over to movies and stuff in the last, 10, 15 years, and cartoons and stuff especially. And now it's like kind of starting to get old, like you said, like right now at this exact moment in history, for some reason it's like, especially because Marvel was like, let's do some multiverse stuff. It's like, everyone's like, whoa, this is the new hot button word that we can say, attached to the title of our movie that will make everyone watch the movie. And it's like, I think you're overestimating this, honestly. Like, one of the big reasons why it had like any impact for Marvel specifically was actually just because it tied together older Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, we're hitting the point of multiverse singularity, I think.
Right. And now, like, I think a lot of people were pumped about those first couple of multiverse things that Marvel did, and now it's like, but now everything is saying multiverse, and it's going way too far, and it definitely starts to wear out its welcome, because, to be honest, even though it's a cool concept in general, as soon as you say there's a multiverse, you kind of both created all the problems and solved all the problems in your universe.
But okay, so that's the entire history of Sonic the Hedgehog animated adaptations. I guess I could also go into detail about how I think it's Ken Penders, the guy who is largely responsible for the insanity that was the Archie comic. Sonic the Hedgehog did have a pitch for a movie, but honestly, it was one of those things where I've tried researching it, but every time, the cringe is so strong that I wake up on the floor of my office, 2 hours later, not remembering anything, so...
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I can't imagine what an Archie Comics Sonic movie would look like, because that thing's just complete insanity in general. You could do some cool stuff with it, I think, but there's just, I mean, Archie Sonic has like chaos magic and can wish things to happen and stuff, ridiculous nonsense like that. Like, I don't
know. But anyway, so let's get talking about the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie. So, we had heard that there was going to be a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and for a long time we've been getting little bits and pieces. Like I remember hearing that they cast Jim Carrey to play Dr. Robotnik, which I thought was an interesting choice because Jim Carrey does not look like Dr. Robotnik very much. And I even remember seeing on Facebook, like someone had reposted a tweet of his and he's like, I just got my hair done to be Dr. Robotnik. And it shows him with was it a coif? Yeah. I think my response to that post was literally just posting the question, hair?
Right. Yeah, I remember whenever he got cast thinking that I thought he could probably pull off a pretty reasonable Robotnik as far as like being a over-the-top ridiculous scientist type. Because, Carrey's a pretty good actor, and that's the type of character he usually gets cast as, is a ridiculous over-the-top character. So, I figured he'd pull it off. But yeah, it was like, oh, he's not gonna look anything like the character. Like, they gave... And at the same time, you're watching little bits of information come out, and you're going, okay, so they're clearly trying to kind of ground this in reality some way. So.
Yeah, and you get, like, the silhouette of Sonic. Like, they were teasing it out quite a bit. And then that first trailer dropped.
It's got the little boy calves and the teeth and the eyes. And
oh my gosh, boy, did the internet had a field day with that. And, here's the thing, is there's a part of me that loves watching, because I'm a fan of the Super Mario Brothers movie, okay? I even like the Street Fighter movie, the first one. There's a part of me that has a morbid bile fascination with like seeing how video game movies, how Hollywood has to like just butcher them. And it's like, okay, these are the parts we're willing to keep, and this is all the stuff that we're going to change. And like just going, okay, what is the common logical through line here? Like, why did they make these decisions?
You enjoy them as an essay on bad decisions, essentially?
I guess. It's not that... I make it sound far more intellectual than it is. It's more just, kind of going, that's not what I would have changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some things, and the Super Mario Brothers movie is probably one of the greatest examples where you're just like, every single choice, essentially, you're just like, but why that? Like, I get that you didn't want a cartoonish dinosaur monster to be your villain.
Well, there is a version of the script where it is much more accurate to the games. I think so for the Mario Brothers movie, I think the reasoning was twofold. One, you had two directors who really did not care about the games and wanted to do their own sort of thing. Yeah. And two, the Fantasy World version would have been a lot more expensive to do than to convert a cement factory into Dino Hatton.
Right. Oh, certainly. But there's still the constant question of how does giant man with small reptile head equal Goomba?
But yeah, so it was very much shaping up to be that sort of a thing. So there was it was disgusting, and I did not have high hopes for the movies. I was going to see it just to see what kind of a train wreck it was. Yeah. But the internet had just such a field day with it that the director, in a move that is truly shocking for Hollywood, said, you know what? We'll fix it.
Yeah.
We'll fix it. We'll do it again.
Just incredibly impressive, honestly. Like, and you get it more once you've seen the whole first movie, that the people who were making it were honestly, I think they were pretty clever. They were pretty smart. I think they were trying to make a pretty decent movie. And so when people reacted that way, they were like, oh, well, this is not intended to be a cash grab to just bank on the name of Sonic. This was a legitimate attempt to make a movie about Sonic the Hedgehog in the real world, essentially. And so if people are going to hate it because of the way we made it look, we've got to fix it, which is impressive.
Yeah, and so they got Tyson Hest, who is kind of a big name in the Sonic fan community. He did the intro. I think he was the director for the intro animation to Sonic Mania, for reference, and he's done a bunch of the animations for official Sonic animations now. They got him to redesign the character for 3D. They still made his arms blue.
Yeah. He was definitely still not exactly the way he's supposed to be.
I don't understand why is it everybody wants to make Sonic's arms blue? Because it's like that's just a recurrent thing. They even did that in Sonic Boom.
Yeah,
and it's just like, why is this so hard? Like the contrast really. Honestly, I think the contrast really helps Sonic. Like, it kind of emphasizes Sonic's legs and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, kind of. It just doesn't look. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being.
No, I think honestly for this movie too, it would have been a good choice because he looked much more like a cartoon character since he's pretty much all one color in this live action world. Whereas if there had been more contrast with the fleshier colors and stuff, I think he would have looked a little bit more like a real creature. And, they did other things to try to make him look more like a real creature with his spines and stuff like that. And so you kind of would have thought that's what they would have gone for. But yeah, they certainly didn't. So, okay.
But, yeah, so they redid Sonic. They delayed the movie to do so. And that actually was, I think, a huge part of the film's success actually comes from that because... I don't want to get too controversial, but Hollywood here of late has been very prone to being very defensive. Like if you complain about anything about a movie, they just try to say, well, no, it's the children who are wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is over the last 5 or 10 years, Hollywood has been incredibly defensive, and if you make any legitimate critique of any of their IP, they have been much more likely to try to respond with, well, only bad people think that way, or, well, that's just a small group of people who believe that, and it's really just because they're bad people, you know, and it's like... Don't get me wrong, I am 100% sure that there are bad people who think things because they're jerks.
And the reason that they can get away with that is it's always easy to cherry pick bad actors. I have this, what I've deemed Strawn's negative visibility hypothesis, where the most visible member of any group is the least desirable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so those people exist and they're out there, and it does make it easy for them to blame things like that on people. But there are plenty of us who are just enjoy media and aren't even that critical, and we're just like, oh, actually, I think you could have done a better job on that thing for X, Y, or Z reason, and they're just like, you're wrong! And so this was really interesting that we were, as fans of it, being able to say, wow, that looks bad, and I don't really think I'm going to enjoy that. Will I watch it because it seems like an interesting train wreck? Probably, but am I going to buy it and watch it again later? Probably not, unless it's so bad that I enjoy mocking it from now on. And so the fact that they actually turned around and said, oh, wait, the fans, the people who really care about this stuff, and let me tell you, the Sonic fandom really cares about that stuff.
Yes.
The people who really care about that stuff, they actually listened to them and actually did what was being asked of them. And good on them, and I have so much more respect for these two movies because of that than I would have before. And I had to see it. Once the outrage of the fans caused the change, and they were like, we're listening to you and we want to make this better, it created so much goodwill between me and the movie. I was like, oh, they really care about this, so it's probably going to be a half-decent movie, and it was.
Yeah. So let's... Sonic has always been a very character-driven franchise. I mean, it literally was created to make a mascot. To give Sega a mascot. And so let's start off by talking about the characters. So there are plenty of characters in the first movie, but the major three are Sonic, James Marsden, Tom Wachowski, and Dr. Robotnik. And so, let's start with Sonic, the leading man. So Sonic has a new backstory. He's like an alien or something, and he's basically in witness protection. Well, not really, because it's not being enforced by anyone. He's in hiding. Witness protection would mean that someone's out there actually protecting him. But so he's like being raised by an owl, who we have no. This is an original character of Longclaw, right. And he has to hide out on Earth, and so this is a kind of an interesting interpretation of Sonic, because he is snarky, but he's kind of more hyperactive.
Yeah, it's definitely in the intent here is for this to be, even though I think Sonic has always been kind of like a teenager or even younger. This was definitely an attempt at an even younger version of Sonic, whether he looks it or not.
Yeah, this is Zoomer Sonic.
Yeah,
this ain't your dad's Sonic.
Yeah, this is
Zoomer Sonic.
And to be honest, that's kind of, again, like you say, Sonic is a mascot, and who was Sonic for us? He was this radical 90s kid. Well, now he's flossing, because when the movie came out, that was what the kids were doing. That's what the cool kids were doing. And is it cringy 2 years later or whatever, 3 years later to watch it again? Yes, absolutely. But
it was cringy at the time.
Yeah, it was. Absolutely. But when this movie
just
came
remember,
out,
kids, remember, you're cringe. You just don't realize it yet.
Yes, absolutely. When this movie came out,
and also realize we've all been there. So you're also not special.
Yes. When this movie came out, the youth group that I was working with, there were kids flossing fairly often, because that's what kids do. And so, even though he is, like you say, he is Zoomer Sonic, and I think that was completely intentional.
100%.
But it is an interesting spin for him to be like tragic. To have this tragic backstory.
Yeah, and honestly, him dealing with a lot of social isolation. Oh wow, he really is the Zoomer Sonic. Dealing with a lot of social isolation as like a part of his character, and just kind of seeing how that affected him. That it does add some pathos to his character.
Yeah, and to do that, to make Sonic make sense in the real world, I think was very reasonable. I actually appreciate, and as we get to the setting and plot, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but just in general, how this movie did a good job, as well as one could be expected, at marrying a character like Sonic in some way to the real world, quote unquote, and making it make sense.
Yeah. I do have to admit, I have a little bit of trouble with, I don't think Ben Schwartz was a bad choice. Like, I can definitely understand, just based on, like, some of the characters he's played before, especially, like, Randy Cunningham, Ninth Grade Ninja, and stuff. I can look at it and go, yeah, I see why they casted him, but I don't know, it's still, he feels so different from all the other Sonics we've had that it is a little hard for me, but then again, this is a different Sonic. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think the actual tone of voice fits pretty decently, but not necessarily the delivery of lines.
I think the delivery was trying a little too hard to be. I don't know. It's I can't quite. I don't want to say smarmy, but there was something that was just it's like, okay, tone it down just a little bit, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And
not like tone it down at all times. It's just like, right. Yeah, that line probably needs a little tweak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was mainly it, was the voice was pretty close in tone, and I think reading some of the lines a little differently might have helped. But at the same time, again, this is us speaking from, the Sonic that we're super used to, which is definitely a 90s snarky Sonic versus this, which was a quippy Sonic, and those seem like they would be the same, but they're slightly different.
Yeah. One's a little bit more going for the burn. The other one's just kind of more playful.
Right. Yeah.
But overall, yeah, it's a very different version of Sonic, and it is kind of, to summarize, it's a different version of Sonic, but I think it works for what the movie was trying to do. So next is the co-star, James Marsden. And I have to admit, I had some trepidation Sorry, Tom Wachowski. I have it in my notes as James Marsden because I couldn't remember the character's name for the longest time. And so I did James Marsden, then in parentheses, Tom Wachowski.
And his dentist knows him as Tim. That's one of the lines from the first movie, and it's actually a fantastic line, and it gets a callback a little bit later, and it's pretty great.
Okay, I don't remember it getting a callback, but...
Yeah, Robotnik very shortly after says that his dentist calls him Rob. And I believe at another point he is referred to as Tim by somebody else. I can't remember for sure, but yeah.
But anyway, so when I first heard about that Sonic was going to have a human kind of counterpoint, I was a little bit concerned that, because there's this, in like movies that have talking animals, weirdly they tend to, like, all of the main conflict of the story is really the human's conflict. Right. And the talking animal just complicates their conflict. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is some of that, but
a little bit, and more in the second movie, which again we'll get to that eventually, and that's some of probably more of my critiques of the second one. But I feel like I was pretty afraid when I first saw that it was going to have a human sidekick as well. Sonic does not have good history dealing with human characters. If you really
Chris
think
Thorndike,
about it,
what was her name? Princess Elise.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to mention
that? So I was a little afraid, and I was very afraid it was going to accidentally end up being a talking animal movie instead of a Sonic movie. And
I think they did strike a pretty good balance, though. He has his own motivations, but the thing is, his motivations ultimately are what propel him to go on the adventure with Sonic. So it is, it does, because he wants to be, so for those of you who haven't seen the movie, in which case while you're listening to us spoil everything without a second thought, if you haven't seen the movie, he is the chief of police for a small town in
like the sheriff
Montana?
Or something. I think
is Montana that mountainous?
Maybe I think it maybe is supposed to be in Washington. Maybe
I don't know. I could have sworn it was one of those flyover states, but
it might have
said the Oklahoman. That them's over there. That's flyover country.
Yeah, and they don't really ever say, but I know in the second movie that he's in Seattle briefly, and I know that when you see his map and he's like plotting out how to get to San Francisco whenever he gets the job, it comes down from the north by like a lot, but it might obviously Montana is northeast of, so it might still work. Yeah.
But so he feels dissatisfied with being a police officer for a small town because he doesn't feel like he's making a big enough impact because nothing ever happens there. And so he wants to be a hero. He wants to help people, kind of like Sonic does. And he's so he wants to go to like San Francisco and be a police officer there. But that actually feeds into, when Sonic is in trouble, he realizes, oh, okay, now's my chance to step up and help someone who really needs me. And
well as he's actually partially to blame for Sonic's position that he's in, and right. Sonic points that out. And so he does kind of, guilt him a little bit into being along for the ride.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where it definitely had the potential to sort of overshadow Sonic's story, but in here it really just kind of helps support it. I'm not sure if the human sidekick was entirely necessary, though, but, it's one of those things where oftentimes they feel like the audience, you need an audience surrogate character.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it was, like I said, I think what they were really going for was Sonic in the real world. Mm-hmm. And when we get into Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and there's other Sonic-like creatures around who are clearly CGI and very cartoony and stuff, every time it's just them on screen, you don't feel like you're in the real world. So this kind of having the human sidekick character...
It grounds it?
It grounds it because, like, for instance, they're driving in a car for a big portion of the movie, and they have their silly excuses for why Sonic can't just run there by himself. But it really does help you feel like this is happening in the real world whenever they're driving a pickup truck and there's other cars on the road and stuff like that, as opposed to just Hedgehog runs fast as Robot Man chases him, right. Which could have been the alternative. So
before we move on to the Robot Man, I do want to make one thing clear. I really, really, really appreciate them not making Tom Wachowski's character's problem, oh, he likes this girl, or he has a girlfriend that's, he's not really sure he wants to commit to, because we've seen that cliche in talking animal movies so many times. And here, it's refreshing that not only is he married, so they're already, past that stage of the relationship. It's a very healthy relationship. Like, they're making sacrifices for each other. They're, Tom, worked 2 jobs to put her through veterinary school, and now she's willing to pack up her practice and move down to San Francisco so he can follow his dreams. It's actually a very sweet relationship.
Yeah, this is a healthy, loving relationship between the two of them, and neither one of them is portrayed as somebody who is the idiot in the relationship or the fool who is always making the other one look good or anything, which is super common in a lot of marriages in television. And so it was...
I have to wonder if that part of the movie was written by someone who didn't live in Hollywood.
Right, exactly. Because the fact that these were 2 loving people that supported each other and cared about each other is so different than many, many, many couples in cartoons.
Yeah, it's almost like it was written by someone who lived in the real world.
Right. And so
I'm not saying all relationships are like that. But
no, absolutely not. But it was a more realistic relationship, especially a more realistic picture of a good relationship, which I like to watch things too. If I'm going to be watching a couple interact, it's not that their relationship has to be perfect or anything, but I would like it to not disparage one of them totally and make you constantly question why are these 2 people together? Why would she be with him, or why would he be with her? And instead, it was this is a nice couple. I like them.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it made sense.
Okay, but. So, moving on to the villain now. So, there's Dr. Robotnik, as portrayed by Jim Carrey. And so, you've already expressed your opinion on Jim Carrey. I did not grow up in the Jim Carrey household.
I didn't really either, to be honest. Really? Yeah, we watched very few of his things. I just was very aware of him. But my family didn't like very many of his movies. They were almost always just a little too racy for my family, so we didn't see very many of them. But I did get to see him in a couple of his more family-ish movies and thought he did a decent job of it. And having, grown up looking at his roles and stuff, even though I didn't see very many of them at the time or even very many of them since, I was like, I think he can pull off crazy person.
Yeah, so I will say... Well, okay, when I say I didn't grow up in a Jim Carrey household, I need to clarify. It's not that I didn't grow up in a household where I didn't watch a ton of Jim Carrey movies. I didn't watch a ton of Jim Carrey movies, for the record, but no, both my parents dislike him.
Yeah.
they think he's just way too hammy.
Yeah, my mom
has
stated
him a lot. That she did like him in The Truman Show. She thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, that was one of the main ones that I did actually see whenever I was younger, was The Truman Show, and I really did enjoy him in that and thought he did a good job in it. So
I've never actually seen it, now that I think of it.
It's super interesting. You should check it out.
Okay, I'll add that to the list. But yeah, so I think, I don't know, it's one of those things where there's stuff I like about this depiction of Dr. Robotnik and stuff that it's just just Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey.
Yes, absolutely. That's part of the charm of it and the issue with it, is that if you dislike Jim Carrey, there is no way you're going to enjoy this movie, which is unfortunate. He's pretty enjoyable in general. I think he's actually a little bit better as Robotnik in the first one than the second one, if I'm being honest, which is weird because he looks more like Robotnik in the second movie. But in this first one, what you get is this is Robotnik before he became evil mad scientist, even if that's more or less what he was. And you could see a person that acts that way going a little crazier and then just ending up being the Robotnik of the games. And so I think he did a really good job in this first one, because even though some of the things he didn't feel exactly like Robotnik, they still felt like, I can see a person like this just having one of their screws come loose, and then they're just like a maniacal, I'm going to take over the whole world, Sonic sort of character.
Yeah, and one of the things I did like about him is that you do get this sense that there is this incredible, like, pettiness to everything he does.
Absolutely.
That is one of the things I like. I remember my brother, actually, when we were rewatching the first one before we went to see the second one, and the line I did not expect that. But I expected
I expected to not expect something, so it still counts.
Yeah, so it still counts. And he just said, that is a wonderfully petty statement.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the whole character just oozes with how petty he is. I think it's one of his major defining features, you know. Like, he's, like, I think a huge part of him going after Sonic in the first movie has just as much or more to do with wanting to get back at Tom for punching him. And it even has that line about he's only been hit by one other person before, and it was the bully, and then the bully ended up drinking through a straw for a year. So, like, very, very petty person that's going to get their revenge, you know? And that fits the character well, because obviously we know Robotnik is always coming back and trying to defeat Sonic again with some new thing, and it fits.
Yeah, so I guess ultimately I have mixed feelings about this version of Robotnik, but you know, I think you can look at the character and you can at least say, yeah, no, his motives make sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly, and I think that he helped tie in. He's an interesting bridge character to connect the real world to Sonic the Hedgehog, because he's the sci-fi that connects the nonsense of Sonic to the rest of the world. Because again, it's like this real world, it's our world, and suddenly Sonic the Hedgehog is there, and you're like, these things really don't seem like they fit together. And then they're like, but here's Dr. Robotnik, and he's kind of in between. Even though he's goofy, and there's like all this nonsense and stuff, he's got drones, that's his thing, and he's just very intelligent and stuff. And then he's acting goofy for a regular person, but you still kind of feel like a real person could act that way, and it kind of weirdly bridges and ramps up to Sonic the Hedgehog being in that world. Even though he gets introduced later in the movie than Sonic does, it still kind of helps you go, okay, so this is still the real world, and then there's just this one weird scientist, and then there's Sonic.
Okay, yeah, and when you put it that way, that actually makes a lot of sense. He's kind of an emulsifying agent.
Yeah, and you really get that from the character the first time he shows up, and you've got all these very normal military people around, and he drives up in his weird truck and gets out and starts acting pretty crazy in front of the military people, and it kind of does subvert to how you think maybe that situation's going to happen. And then, it kind of helps emulsify the absurdity of the story to come afterwards into a more real-world sort of feeling.
Yeah. Also, I think it was a missed opportunity. His sidekick, who I don't recall being really very relevant at all in the first movie. He has a bigger role in the second one, but I feel like it was a really missed opportunity for them to not name him Snively.
Yeah, they absolutely could have, and that it would have fit the character well too, honestly. So
yeah, and I mean he didn't. You don't have to keep any other aspect of Snively's character, because I think Snively is Robotnik's nephew in the Sonic Sat AM. But yeah, that would have been just a nice little reference.
Yeah,
but yeah, we've already gone into like some of the setting. Yeah, it's Sonic in the real world, and there's like all of the Hedgehog characters or all the animal characters are from outer space, which we'll get more into in the sequel. But I find this fascinating because every adaptation that has Sonic interacting with regular people, with the possible exception of the OVA, always has to justify Sonic's existence. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, they really do tend to have some sort of excuse. I'm trying to think in Adventure, the first.
Well,
Adventure
no. I'm not talking about the games, because that's the weird thing. Because it's in the like Sonic X, it's like Sonic is from another dimension, and
right.
Like the Archie's comics has an explanation for it too. Though I don't think the cartoon Saturday AM goes into detail about it.
Yeah.
But they have their own explanation for where the hedgehogs and the echidnas and all that come from. That has something to do with like a retrovirus that reprograms people's DNA. It's it's insane.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I guess that's in the games. They treat it, as far as I can remember, a little bit more like Dragon Ball tended to treat things early on in the show, where there just happens to be like dragon people and
it's just a part of the world,
cat people and stuff around.
Sonic is just he's just a part of the world. Like there's no origin story, there's nothing, and everybody's just like, that's what a hedgehog looks like. Yeah. What do you mean 4-legged? No, they walk around and wear sneakers.
And they're bright blue most of the time.
Or pink. No, not most of the time. I mean, they can be pink, they can be black and red, they can be gray. They come in all different colors.
That's true. Literally any color. Yeah.
So it's weird to see this continue that tradition. And I mean, I get it. Maybe it would have been too jarring for live action to just have Sonic be simply be. They needed to explain it, but it is an interesting trend where they always have to give an explanation for where Sonic comes from.
Yeah, I think probably again it came down to what did they want to do with this, and I think they wanted to go for Sonic in the real world, and so then there had to be an explanation. So if this had been a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, more in the vein of what the Detective Pikachu movie was, it would have he just would have been there, and everyone been like, yeah, this is a hedgehog. But for whatever reason, they were like, we're going to make a Sonic movie about Sonic in the real world. And so I guess he could have just shown up and been like, yeah, I've just always been around, and I'm the Blue Devil, and, I'm just like, he would have been a cryptid, essentially, like Bigfoot or something. But because they wanted to go, this is Sonic, and we're somehow integrating him into just the world you live in right now, there had to be some explanation for why he's here and why he's a hedgehog, but also blue and has super speed.
But so overall, what do you think of the actual plot, though?
I thought that the plot was decent. It's clear that they wanted to set up some lore early on, and so that's why they had you have the echidnas that are chasing Long Talon Claw. That's it. I was going two bird with that Long Claw, so you get some story going on early on. I think probably part of their want to make it where he's from a different place is I think they wanted a place that looks like the games to be in the world. And so, you get to see, the Green Hill Zone there as he's running through and running up the ramps and jumping around there right at the beginning.
Oh yeah, that reminded me of something I actually forgot. So there is in the official game, I think this is still canon for the games. Sonic actually has a stated place of birth, and it is a real life location, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
It's Christmas Island.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's one of those things where it's it's like, again, he was just born in the world. It's like it's a world with cartoon hedgehogs. Don't think about it too hard.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of like Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
It's like Bugs Bunny's just a rabbit. That's just what rabbits look like.
Yeah. And it's possible here that part of what we got is also based on success of other more recent movies that there's been a push more recently whenever you want to take something that is ridiculous and you want to make it more palatable, you just call it an alien and then make it partially a comedy. And so, like, we saw that with the first Thor movie, and it was pretty effective at the time, even though Thor was maybe not one of the more successful Marvel movies early on. It was like, oh, they're going to make a movie about a literal Norse god, and he's going to be really corny and stuff. They were like, he's an alien, also it's slightly a comedy, and it worked. So I guess maybe that's kind of something that people have figured out more recently, is you just say he's an alien and make it a comedy, and everybody's just going to go along with it.
Right.
And I think they wanted like I said, they wanted to set up some lore and stuff and create essentially a Sonic cinematic universe, I think. And so I think that's probably partially how they started there. But yeah, I think that the plot was pretty interesting. I didn't like the rings the way they are, honestly, because I like the rings having something to do with Sonic's life more than being
Okay, so this is actually something my brother pointed out, is that he said, notice that Sonic always whenever he drops his rings, it's always because he's gotten hit in the face.
It's true, yeah. He does get punched and drops his rings a lot.
So it's one of those things where it's like, there's a reference in there. It's just very subtle.
It's true. It's way subtle. What I would have maybe done differently is, instead of it being like, oh, this is his transportation device, which is a weird plot device in and of itself, have something to do with his actual power, and that when he uses all of his rings, or if he doesn't have all of his rings, then he's like weaker and totally killable, or something. Could have been an interesting thing. So then the idea of, oh, I have to go get my rings and you need to help me, has more to do with, like, he's literally going to die if he doesn't, or something.
So I think the rings were actually a reference to, like, the bonus rings at the end of the levels in the first game.
Yeah, and those do warp you to a weird, different world, so it still was connected, I agree. But it's also just so strange whenever you have just the main characters just being like, and we can go anywhere now, which, again, it gets weird places in the second movie. And so I think that part of the plot was a little bit contrived to create a scenario where Sonic has to work with humans, where they're like, okay, he's got teleportation rings, and then he loses them somehow, and then, I don't know, what's a good excuse for him to be in a car with a person instead of, running and being Sonic the Hedgehog, and had to kind of work around those problems, because as with all speedster characters, anytime you try to make a movie about them and they're the main character, the constant question is, why is this character not essentially stopping time and defeating everyone around them?
Especially since apparently Sonic can stop time, but only some of the times. Like, his powers are very inconsistent in these movies.
Right. And
I will say, if you're looking for like a rock solid, there are no plot holes kind of movie, this is not going to be the movie for you. It is one of those things where it's like, you just kind of have to accept that's the way it works, because that's what's coolest it runs on rule of cool.
Right. There is a definite willing suspense of disbelief is needed in this movie to enjoy it. But as soon as you get on board, it's a good fun time. And I think I think the plot, even though a couple bits here or there are a little contrived, I think that they did a pretty good job creating scenarios where Sonic couldn't just be faster than everyone else and therefore doesn't have problems.
Yeah. My overall thought of the plot is I figured that if we get like 3 movies, this first one's going to feel kind of weird and out of place. Because the first one is, it doesn't have many characters in the actual, like, moving parts. There are plenty of side characters, but they're kind of, just very briefly in the movie. And so it's, I don't know, it's this weird sort of thing where Sonic's, like, going on a road trip with this cop, and it's kind of this origin story. So, you're used to Dr. Robotnik being the bald guy with the crazy mustache, but here he's Jim Carrey in a weird-looking overcoat. And so it's kind of like this weird origin story that nobody asks for.
Yeah, certainly. I think that like you say, especially having watched the second one and then seeing the teaser for the third one, it's clear that their eventual goal is to have it be just pretty much normal Sonic the Hedgehog in a movie.
Mm-hmm. But they took this weird extra step to get there.
Right.
I think most fans would have just been like, why wasn't Dr. Robotnik bold from the beginning?
Right. This first one had a weird obsession with trying to make everything try to make sense in the real world. And if it was its own movie and it didn't have a sequel, that would have been fine. But as soon as you get into the sequel and the other animal characters show up and stuff, it really starts feeling like two separate movies happening at the same time. And we'll get into that when we talk again about the second one. But I agree that it does weirdly feel like this one is going to be almost from a different universe once we get to a third movie and if they continue from there.
Right. But overall, it's a fast, fun-paced movie. And if you take it on as its own thing, it's pretty good. I would, it's one of those things where there are some moments where it's like, yeah, this is obviously made for a younger audience than me. Mm-hmm. There are some really good jokes, like the Sonic being stuck in the duffel bag. It's probably my favorite just one-off gag in the entire movie. But
yeah, there are a lot of excellent one-liners in the movie, and it's very enjoyable. And it's just a fun time. If you go into it and you're expecting it to be like an Oscar-worthy movie, it's clearly, obviously not trying to be that. And so it does a good job of not overstaying its welcome, being only an hour and 30 minutes-ish, and being good at being like, here's some Sonic references, here's some great jokes, here are tons of memes, just so many memes. And then a handful of things that are weirdly inspired by the Game Theorist on YouTube. But anyway.
Okay. You're going to have to unpack that one for me.
Yeah, so there's a handful of things. It's very clear that the makers of the movie watched the Game Theorist on YouTube. Because the first thing that you notice, and this could have just been a fluke, but in the trailer for the movie, he uses the radar gun at the beginning, and it said that Sonic was going like 700 miles an hour or something like that. Mm-hmm. And in one of the Game Theorist videos, he just offhandedly, or it might have even been one of the movie theory videos, but he's the same guy. Right. He offhandedly explains that radar guns actually don't go up to that high of a speed. Since the trailer, they changed the speed that it shows on the gun to the cap of what a radar gun can show, of 300 miles an hour. So that's kind of just a little interesting one-off sort of thing. But then, and you might say, oh, that's a coincidence. They did their own research. And it could be. However, when Sonic is running near the end of the movie and Robotnik is keeping up with him, he says something along the lines of, "You're going to ruin your joints. They proved it." And there was an entire game theory video about how if Sonic could run as fast as he could, that it was going to destroy all of the joints in his body. So, there is, a bunch of people who were working on this movie who are, super plugged in on the internet and were keeping up with internet culture, and it shows the movie is completely full of internet references and memes and one-off jokes that make more sense to people if they are, plugged into pop culture and stuff. And the unfortunate part of that, of course, is going to just be that if you rewatch this movie in 10 years, it's going to show its age a whole lot.
And there's a Chip and Dale movie that has the original ugly trailer Sonic in it.
Yeah, ugly Sonic.
And I remember, I see that, and it's like, okay, it's funny, but that is not going to hold up.
Because absolutely not.
You're not going to have that context if you weren't there.
Right, yeah. It's funny right now at this exact moment. But to some extent, I think the Sonic movie will hold up a little better than that, just because, for instance, when he's flossing, that is very cringy. I think it was supposed to be cringy, if I'm honest, and it will probably remain cringy from now on until forever.
Well, that was added in later, because I think in the second trailer where they showed off the new design, he actually did a different dance in that scene.
Oh, yeah.
And it looked more like sort of the kind of break dancing he does at the end of a level in the video games.
Yeah. So, yeah. All that to say, I think it was an enjoyable movie, and the people who were making it were clearly paying attention to what was going on in the world and what people wanted and stuff, and they worked hard on it, and it shows. It is probably, I would say, in the top 5 video game movies of all time.
Which isn't saying much.
Isn't saying much, but it also was a perfectly fine movie, even if it wasn't a video game movie, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say I'd give it like a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd say 7 out of 10, perfectly reasonable, maybe even 7.5.
Mm-hmm. All right, but this movie did very, very well, and so it spawned a sequel that came out like only 2 years later. It was actually a very quick turnaround.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially for the bigger people who are involved with it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of surprising how quickly they turned around with, Idris Elba is in this one, and he's like been a pretty big name in stuff for the last 10 years, to be entirely honest. So
I would not know because I don't watch movies.
Yeah, he's actually been talked about a lot by a lot of people as a good new James Bond, actually. So that's kind of the general level of his popularity, is people have legitimately floated him as the next James Bond. Okay.
So, speaking of Idris Elba, so he plays Knuckles in this, and Knuckles is one of the 2 new characters. Well, actually, let's start with Tails, because Tails is, introduced a little bit, actually, Knuckles makes an appearance on screen first, but
Tails is the from the bonus scene, after credits scene of the first movie, actually.
Okay, you got me there. It's just easier to talk about Tails first, because Tails kind of is just... He's one of the hero characters through this. Yeah. So Tails makes an appearance in this movie, and I have to say, don't get me wrong, I really like Tails' voice actress, but it is so freaking weird hearing one of the actors actually from the game series.
Yeah.
Playing one of the characters next to Ben Schwartz, who I've already mentioned. Just it's a little weird for me to accept Ben Schwartz as Sonic. And then Idris Elba, who, he did a good job playing Knuckles, but it is so weird hearing that voice come out of Knuckles.
Yeah, certainly. Tails is this weird thing in this movie where every time it is him with Sonic, it feels like it is a different world. Because it's just like Sonic from the games. And, same voice actress, like you say, and the character behaves more like Tails from the games than Sonic acts like Sonic from the games, or Knuckles acts like Knuckles from the games.
This is a very faithful adaptation of the character from the games. And on one hand, I love that, but on the other hand, it just kind of makes me stop and go, well, why can't we have this for the other characters?
Right. And it's kind of jarring. Every time it's just Sonic and Tails on the screen, it really feels like it's not the same movie. Certainly not the same movie from the first one. But there is actually, as we talk about the story of the second one, we'll get into this more, but there is a lot that makes it feel like this is 2 separate movies going on at the same time that happen to tie together near the end, rather than actually one story.
Okay. I didn't get that from the movie, but I'm interested, maybe you can persuade me. But yeah, I think Tails was represented very accurately. He starts off as very kind of insecure and timid, and, eventually grows into more confident, still a sidekick. And also the weird kind of fanboying over Sonic at the beginning is... Honestly, it's kind of creepy, but I like how they acknowledge it, where Tails says, "Do you trust me?" And Sonic's response is, "Of course not, I just met you!"
Right. But whenever you really, consider Tails as a character, him fanboying over Sonic is kind of what he does. You know, he's kind of like, you're amazing, Sonic, like all the time. And so, like, to give him a good reason to be that way in this universe, like, actually made sense. Where it's like, okay, so he's, like, essentially been watching Sonic this entire time. And since Sonic at the beginning of this movie, it's clear that he's, like, been trying to Batman his way around. Like, Tails has been watching, essentially, episodes of a Sonic superhero TV show. And so he's, like, really pumped to get to meet Sonic, the superhero, whenever he meets him, essentially.
But so the other character that they introduce is Knuckles. And I have to say, I really like this depiction of Knuckles, even if, like, it is so freaking weird to hear that deep of a voice coming out of Knuckles. Like, Knuckles typically has a fairly deep voice, but he sounds a lot younger than this one. Yeah, and then on top of that, you have like I think it's a British accent, I believe. Really? That Idris Elba has, and so like it is really very different from what we're used to for Knuckles. But I think he did a really good job. I appreciated him. Emily mentioned that he was kind of like the Drax of the movie a couple of times, where he like some of the jokes are for him, or that he doesn't understand what's going on and stuff. And it worked out well. It was enjoyable to have, and I thought he was a cool character. Like, I liked a lot of the moments with him where, you know, like, and of course a lot of the moments were the moments from the trailer, but him catching Sonic, or him saying, you know, I don't need your power and stuff like that. And of course him bringing in a lot of the Chaos Emerald stuff with him into the story. And still being that kind of reasonably lore accurate. Like, let's because there's the Echidna warrior tribe, which is no longer around. There's him being too trusting of like Robotnik, but also the social awkwardness is kind of an aspect of Knuckles' character, because part of the reason why he was very trusting of Dr. Robotnik in the original Genesis games is because he lived alone on an island with non-anthropomorphic animals pretty much his entire life. He just didn't know any better. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they got the whole protector of the Chaos Emeralds thing that shows up in Adventure? Adventure. Well, Knuckles is, in the games, he's the protector of the Master Emerald, which is separate from the Chaos Emeralds. And that's been true ever since Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles. Okay. It's just, it gets a lot more attention in the adventure games because the story starts with him guarding the Master Emerald, while... Right. And then in the Genesis games, you don't get to see the Master Emerald until the end of the game, and if you're terrible at video games like we all were when we were kids... Exactly. Yeah. It's just not near as noticeable. Yeah, and then of course in Adventure 2 Battle, whatever you want to call it, all of the Knuckles sections are literally just collecting Master Emerald shards. Is like his whole thing. Even the one that happened in the Egyptian, what was it? The Death Chamber or whatever, the Egyptian thing. I thought he was looking for keys in that one. But that may have just been Rouge's. No, I think he was looking for keys in that one. He might have, yeah. Yeah. So there's one stage that wasn't. Yeah. That. So yeah, like they did a good job of tying his character in with the things that made sense for his character and being somewhat lore accurate, and also using him as the excuse to be like, oh, by the way, now we're going to bring in the Chaos Emeralds. We're going to bring in, you know, like more of these anthropomorphic characters and stuff. And I do think that Knuckles was handled better adding him into the story than Tails was, because we had no idea why Tails was even here for a while in the movie. I was still like, until he finally explained how he knew to come and that he came to warn Sonic specifically about Knuckles, I was just like, did I stop paying attention and I missed his explanation of why he's here? Or did they literally just say this movie is too long and just skip that part of the story? And then after he had been in the movie... I have a hard time they ever said this movie is too long. Yeah, I know. And they finally hit a point where he, like, just offhandedly kind of explains, just mentions, that's why I came to warn you, Sonic.
And I was like, oh, is that it? Is that the whole... Okay, cool.
Yeah, and he even at later points, Sonic, when Sonic tells him, hey, you're coming along too, he's like, well, no, I just came here to warn you. I'm not a field guy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really make sense why Sonic wants him along anyway, but...
Yeah, they definitely yada-yada'd why Tails was there and why he was coming along with Sonic, which is impressive, because this movie is long and they had time that they could have spent on important plot points like that instead of other things that they focused on.
But, yeah, the thing is, so you say that this felt like two different movies when Sonic and Tails were on screen together. I will admit, it did feel very different, but I actually kind of liked it because it's like, oh, this feels a lot more like the games. Yes,
so I am not at all saying that it was bad the way it felt when Sonic and Tails were on the screen. And now that we've talked about Tails, we've talked about Knuckles. If I could kind of steal your role as podcast leader, we might as well hop into story now, and I can go ahead and explain my theory here. When they introduced more anthropomorphic animal characters, it makes the movie feel more like real Sonic. The problem is that the first movie posited the question of, what if Sonic the Hedgehog was in the real world? And so then they had this problem of, how do we deal with the fact that there are a handful of very normal human beings in this movie that shouldn't have any business going on a Sonic adventure? And their solution was, don't have the characters go on the Sonic adventure. And so what you get there is this weird romantic comedy movie about a wedding going on where those characters keep calling up Sonic on the phone and talking to him about his Sonic adventure. And then Sonic over here with other anthropomorphic animals fighting. And
to be fair, that is kind of a common comedy trope where you have this group, someone else that's off on the sidelines just sort of checking in occasionally, and it's like, oh no, everything's fine.
Yes, certainly. However, if you were to remove the human characters other than Robotnik from the movie, it would have been pretty similar. This is a 2-hour-long movie.
And I am glad that they did sort of move them to the side for the most part.
Yes.
Because I think having a greater focus on Sonic ultimately strengthened the movie. Because I wanted to see a Sonic the Hedgehog movie that felt like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Certainly, yeah. And that's kind of where, going back to your point of the first movie is going to feel really weird comparatively to the second one, and especially the third one, is that when the scene started where Sonic and Tails got captured, and then it's suddenly the wife and the sister running around with Tails' gadgets.
Yeah, like Maddie and Rachel, I think they're names.
Yeah, and
I only remember Maddie's name is because I've seen both movies twice now.
Right.
Like, it wasn't until yesterday where I was watching Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for a second time that I finally got in my thick skull that, it's Maddie.
Right.
Like, I just always remember her as Pretzel Lady or whatever.
Yes, I remember Pretzel Lady and Rachel. I don't know why I can remember the sister's name better, but anyway.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, do they even say her name in any of the movies, or is it just in the credits?
Right.
But they do say it in the movies.
They do, a couple times, yeah. And, it's just, when you have that scene with the two of them secret agenting it for a minute, you're just like, what's going on? Suddenly it's just like, this is a very different movie from what I was just watching.
Kind of, in my opinion, that scene was kind of the it's kind of like the Roadhouse in the first movie. It's like, this scene, I guess it's kind of entertaining, but it isn't really necessary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you had Sonic and Tails captured by the military guys, then they're just free the next scene,
Yeah, certainly. I think, weirdly, I think that part of that was just to tie in Sonic and the non-animal characters into a way that it made sense that they were in the same movie.
Yeah, and so this is one of those things where it's really tricky because I have said I do like the fact that it focused much more on Sonic and Tails, but at the same time, I'm also glad they didn't completely write out the other characters, because that would have been really weird too, and that is a very common thing to do in these kinds of movies.
Yeah, and so that's it's very difficult, and I think that's why the second one doesn't hit quite as well as the first one in a lot of ways, is that I do think that they tried in the first movie to create a situation where Sonic and these human characters are interacting and why it makes sense that they're interacting with each other. And for the second movie, they're like, we want this one to have these other characters and have things get to some more Sonic-y action. And we're happy that they did that, but they didn't want to just dump the other characters and say they're not in the movie anymore. And so it made them have to come up with reasons why the characters are interacting. And that's why you end up with a 2-hour-long movie, is because...
Yeah. Well, and one of the things is, I was explaining this to, I was talking to my mom last night and, kind of going over some of the stuff that I was going to talk about in the podcast today. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that this movie does not have a complicated plot. It's very easy to follow.
Yeah, it's very simple. But
it is a very intricate plot. Because the thing is, I've thought about this, because I remember I've heard, the YouTuber Arlo, he had this long video about how he hated this movie, which I don't hate this movie for the record, but no. he was talking about how many scenes were pointless, and I keep thinking about, it's like, okay, barring a rewrite, let's say that you're not allowed to revise the script in any way and not change major plot points. Really think about it. What scenes can you remove? Because pretty much almost every scene either is the setup for something that happens later, or it's a payoff for something that was set up.
Yes,
and so
certainly.
That is one of the things that I find fascinating about this movie, because it's like almost every scene, I think the only two that I off the top of my head, I'm sure if I watched it like 6 times and, with like a notepad and paper, I'm sure I could think of like, oh, well, you can cut these 4 seconds out of the movie or whatever. But the only two that I feel largely superfluous are the Russian lodge scene. Mm-hmm. Though you could argue that that's a large part of that is Sonic and Tails bonding. But yeah. I don't know. It felt like just sort of a rehash of the Roadhouse scene in the first one. And I thought the Roadhouse scene was kind of superfluous, to be honest. I mean, interesting set piece, but whatever. Yeah. And the other one was, the stealthing through the hotel and trying to freeze Sonic and Tails.
Yeah. You had also the, there's just a handful of those times where, like, when the police officer back at home, Wade, is questioning the stone or whatever. Yeah, you're right. There you have a lot of them were still good scenes, but when Rachel goes and reconfronts her ex-fiance.
Well, I would argue that one, there's a reason why I mentioned payoff. It's like that one, you kind of, otherwise you have what TV tropes would call what happened to the mouse. It's like you have this plot point and then it just sort of vaporizes.
Right. And there could have been some shorter winded ways of handling it.
Trust me, I'm not arguing that this movie could not be trimmed. It definitely could be scenes definitely could have been truncated. It's just like a lot of these scenes, like, you look at it and you think, well, this is a pointless scene. It's like, why have him swap the rings out? And it's like, what's this cutesy sort of rom-com nonsense. And it's like, well, that sets up the scene where...
Which I absolutely called that one, by the way. I told
I think we all saw that one coming.
Yeah. It's like he gave her the wrong ring. I know it.
I don't know why he had to say, no, just give me the ring. It's an emergency. I'll explain later. Why can't he just say, there was a mix-up. This is actually her ring.
Yeah. He really should have walked up and said, here's the ring. Sorry about that. That's mine. And then if they...
It got, it got mixed up.
Yeah, and then if they said, why do you let us finish the wedding, you could be like, that one's a weird space ring. You know that stuff exists. It might hurt you. I don't even know what happens if you put it on your finger. Yeah, there was some of those scenes that, they could have handled in different ways. And obviously there's always that problem with characters where you're like, please just explain what's actually happening instead of just saying words.
But then again, Tom does seem like the kind of guy that, just given their dynamic, he probably would want to keep their interaction as short as possible.
Certainly, yeah. But and I think I think the movie could have used some rewriting, but I think the way it was, that it is difficult to truncate much of it. Because there is one of the things that the movie does do well is, everything is referencing something that's going to come later, and so it ultimately does fit pretty well. There's still
something I want to make clear is I just remembered this. Sorry to cut you off, but one of the things is that you have to have the wedding scene, at least in the way that it is now, because you have to introduce Gunn, because that's going to be an essential aspect of the next movie.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And so, you could say, well, why have them go to the wedding at all? And it's like, well, you need to have Gunn introduced somewhere, and you could do that a different way. That's certainly true, but you have to do it at some point in the second movie if you want to foreshadow the third one. Yeah.
And I totally think that if you wanted to make this movie shorter, which I think would have been a good idea, just spending less time with the human characters is really the only way to do it. Just saying, sorry, James Marsden, you're not going to be in this one very much. You're going to be on the phone checking in, and we're not going to see what happens between you on the phone checking in. And just having it be these characters show up, Sonic's going to try to figure out what the heck's going on. Maybe eventually he does get captured by the military, and then maybe some of the human characters show up and save him from the military, and you're like, okay, that's where these characters fit into the movie, and then you have them end up with the in the temple, and the end of the movie could have been different than all of the human characters and them ending up in the same place with the big robot.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, so the big robot, I'm not sure how I would do it differently, but there's a part of me that feels like, man, I feel like it should have ended in the temple. That feels like the final, that feels like a good place for a final showdown.
I agree.
And then the movie just keeps going after that.
Yeah, I agree that probably should have been where it ended, is in the temple. The temple was a great set piece that could have been used better. There were some funny moments there, and there were some interesting things that happened there, but they really just zoom through that. And it was definitely one of those moments where I was
judging as it was based on Labyrinth Zone, there's no zooming through Labyrinth Zone.
Yeah, certainly.
So that's not even accurate to the game.
No, not at all.
I'm sorry, continue.
It was one of those moments where I was like, how is this movie 2 hours long and yet still rushing through things in such a weird way? Because I legitimately, this is what happened. They have the scene where Sonic is on the beach, and he wakes up, and he walks over, and he sees the temple. Then it cuts to Robotnik and Knuckles. And then Sonic just lands at the, coming down a waterfall and ends up inside of the temple. And I'm like, oh, did I miss something? When did he fall into a river or something? What happened? And Emily's like, no, there wasn't anything in between that. He just showed up. And then he also just shows up at the end, too, and you miss most of him dealing with the ends. You see him bouncing around a little bit. But the Sonic essentially washes up on a beach. You see him dodge a couple of traps, and then he's just at the end facing off with Knuckles and Robotnik. And you're like, this could have been the end of the movie, could have been them in the temple and avoiding traps and getting through it and stuff, and Tails shows up with his airplane at that point and ends up helping Sonic and stuff, and then Robotnik gets the emerald, of course, and then I was kind of wondering if Chaos was going to be what happened there, as opposed to him gaining the power cosmic and using it to build a robot.
Yeah, I have to admit, Robotnik getting cosmic powers also was just a really weird choice, because it's that doesn't show up in any of the games, and it felt really out of place.
Yeah, I think that the better way of doing it might have been, Robotnik is all about building things to use or gaining some, using some sort of other thing and pitting it against Sonic. Mm-hmm. I really could have seen a situation where he gets a hold of it and it's more of a wish-granting sort of thing rather than he becomes super powerful. And he could have, asked for something to be Sonic's equal or something, or maybe interacted in it in some way, and either Metal Sonic ends up being there and fighting Sonic, or Chaos ends up being there and fighting Sonic. Both, in my eyes, would have made more sense for the character and the story of the movie, really, than just him just being like, I got it, and now I'm like glowing green and I'm got the Force.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, it does kind of resolve the plot point of why is Sonic the only one who knows how to use the Chaos Emeralds? In this one, it's like, oh no, anyone can do it, I suppose. So, at least it does make that sense. Oh yeah, let's take a moment to mention, I actually really appreciate the fact that I know this isn't lore accurate, but fanboys, hear me out. I appreciate that they made the whole thing about the Master Emerald, and the Master Emerald is made of the Chaos Emeralds.
Yeah.
Like, the Master Emerald is not made of the Chaos Emeralds in the original games. It's more like I don't actually know what the Master Emerald does. It
I don't know. It
controls them somehow.
It's connected to them, but it's not. And I don't even think it can't be used to like gain superpowers or anything either, does it? It's just kind of.
I mean, I think it kind of does that in the Genesis games, sort of, but not really. Yeah. Why does Knuckles guard it? Like it's just a big green rock.
It's just his job. That's why.
But anyway, I do appreciate them like kind of consolidating them all into one thing, because that's it's one of those things where it's like, and hunting 7 emeralds would have just completely destroyed the pacing of the movie. So kudos to them. That was a smart choice, even if it's not lore accurate. It was a smart choice.
Legitimately good idea to allow it to be both the thing that Knuckles is guarding or trying to reobtain, and the thing that gives Sonic his powers. And it was leading up to it near the end of the movie, and I was like, please tell me that Supersonic is going to be in this, because if you've already given us this thing and it's around, and then Sonic doesn't get to use it and be Supersonic, I get you might want to save that for the next movie, but it's going to be a bit of a letdown if we don't get to see that. And I was trying to figure out how they could manage that, since Robotnik had the power, and that was going to be obviously the thing he needed to beat. And they came up with a pretty good way of doing it, that Robotnik used his power to build something, which makes sense because he's Robotnik and he builds things. And then even though he lost the power, he still had the robot, which was intelligent. And that is something that did make sense about the way Robotnik handled having infinite cosmic power. But I do think a better way of ending it could have been something happening at the temple and introducing something other than Robotnik gaining god powers.
Yeah. So we've talked about the story and gone into quite a bit of detail on the length, but I just want to take a moment to say I love all the references in this movie.
Yep.
And the thing is, some of them are really overt. Like Sonic does the Sonic Adventure cover pose in the lodge scene when he's dancing. To some of them are just more subtle, where you get like kind of a general vibe of something like Sonic being on top of a building at the beginning in Seattle is very much like the opening of the Sonic Adventure, or the snowboarding scene is like, oh, that's Ice Cap Zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he punches it. He's holding this chunk, and I say, look at Emily. I say, he's going to start snowboarding. And she goes, what? And he jumps on it. He starts snowboarding. She's like, why isn't he running? He's way faster when he runs. I was like, because it's snowboarding and it's Sonic. Like, there's a whole game of Sonic about Sonic riding boards. Have you ever tried
running downhill, especially one that's covered in fresh powder?
Yeah, absolutely.
But he could spin dash down the hill, but...
Yeah. There's a whole game, Sonic Riders, which was about Sonic and the gang riding floating surfboards.
Oh, it's not just a game. There were like 3 of those things.
Yeah, I know. But I just mean like that's how relevant to Sonic it is that he's going to snowboard at some point, is that there was a spin-off series of Sonic snowboarding games. But yeah, I thought that that was super, super cool that they had those references. It took me a minute on the coffee shop. I didn't
they get the reference.
I didn't catch the name of the coffee shop until near the end of the movie, and then and maybe they didn't show it. I'm not sure.
No, they show it.
Yeah, they didn't show. I didn't see them show it early on when he was there the first couple of times, and then the first time I think it was when Wade showed up and he's standing in front of the door and it's closed and you see the name, and I was like, oh, it's the Mean Bean, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's the Professor Robotnik's Mean Bean machine, and Emily's like, what?
Oh yeah, there were so many times where something like there weren't any jokes being spoken or whatever. I just let out a short laugh in the theater, and I'm sure everyone thought I was like crazy, but it's like, yeah, I got that reference.
Yeah, just like tons of little references and stuff. There were also weirdly topical current day references too that didn't have anything to do with Sonic, which was
there
weird.
are a lot of pop culture references, but at the same time I kind of feel like that if Sonic did exist in the real world, he would make pop culture references.
Certainly, yeah.
But okay, so this movie ends and with a after like the first part of the credits, the part where they have the animated part and they actually put some effort into the presentation of it, as seems to be the case with most animated movies nowadays.
Yeah, they redo
I say that. I don't watch movies hardly ever, so I don't know. Maybe that's not common.
They redo the entire movie in actual Sonic Genesis graphics.
Yeah, it's like, why didn't I just watch this version?
I did kind of wonder that a couple of times. I was like, that might have been a better movie.
But so after that segment, they have a short teaser for the next one where the gun guys, remember them? They're important to the next one, like I said. They're like, oh yeah, we were wiping our records of Dr. Robotnik and we found a record of a black site that's holding Project Shadow, whatever,
from 50 years ago.
You get to see Shadow the Hedgehog being, and I need to get gloat about this a little bit. Before we went to the theaters, I was talking to my brothers, and it's like, yeah, so I'm hoping, since they're already introduced Knuckles in this one, I thought it was just going to be Tails and then it would be Knuckles, but since they're already introducing Knuckles in this one, I'm looking forward to seeing Shadow in the third one. And my brothers are like, oh, they're not going to do Shadow in the third one. And so I'm in the theater, I'm elbowing my brother next to me. It's like,
Yep, absolutely.
It's just like, oh my gosh, you were right.
Yeah. Whenever they, I was thinking maybe he might be in the third one as well. And partially I was just reminded, because when Knuckles came on to the screen, my wife Emily was like, is this the, bad version of Sonic? And I was like, not really. He's more like his rival, if anything, and he's a good guy most of the time, except when he's not, and he's not bad Sonic. I was like, that's Shadow. Shadow is bad Sonic. That's what his character is, which also he's also more like Sonic's rival and not always bad.
Yeah.
But
well, actually, so just shameless plug real quick. I have an entire article on the blog explaining why Shadow is actually a way more interesting take on the evil doppelganger archetype than most people give him credit for.
Yeah, I think he's way more interesting than a lot of them too. I'll have to read your post, but yeah, I agree. He's much more interesting than the average one.
But, full disclosure, I'm looking forward to this one because Shadow's my favorite character. Especially Sonic Adventure 2 Shadow. Every Shadow after that. There's a part of me that really wishes that even though he's my favorite character, Shadow, I love you, but you should have stayed dead.
Yeah, certainly. Even Sonic Heroes Shadow is not that good of a character, but he's just also not very well fleshed out comparatively.
No one was in that game. That one was like kind of a weird back to basics sort of, let's do the game progression like it's a Genesis game sort of thing.
Yeah, that was. I wish they had done something different there, and that wasn't kind of the end of the adventure era there. But anyway.
I wish the controls weren't so fiddly. But
yeah, but yeah, I really love Shadow as a character. I think he's very interesting. He does an excellent job of actually adding to Sonic's character, as opposed to just being like, I'm Sonic but bad.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is one of the things I point out in the article is most of the time when the cliched evil doppelganger is, I must defeat you to prove I'm the real one.
Right.
And what is, and the entire thing, what is the most iconic line Shadow says to Sonic is, that blue hedgehog again. It's just like, who is this guy?
He doesn't, he's
I've got stuff to do, man. What? It's like, I finally found you, faker. Right. Sonic's the one who's obsessed with him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a good, cool character, especially in the first game that he's in. And if you ignore any games where he has guns, and yeah, I am excited for the third one. And again, it does start to beg the question of, okay, so we have Robotnik has become increasingly more Robotnik-y. Mm-hmm. And we have Knuckles and Tails in it now. And now if we're going to add in Shadow and theoretically talk about Robotnik's grandfather, whatever they want to have him be this time, it just really is going to start being like, okay, we are getting full on into real Sonic the Hedgehog. So why are these regular people here, and where are they going to fit into the story? And if that's all true, then why didn't we just have real Sonic the Hedgehog movies anyway?
Yeah, that first movie is going to get just retroactively weirder and weirder.
Yeah.
But okay, so before we wrap this up, I have a prediction for the fourth movie, since I apparently was so good at the second one, or at the third one, I mean. So here's my reasoning. Okay, so the second the Sonic Adventure 2 takes place in space, but it's a space colony, so it's very close to Earth.
Right.
I think that they're going to use that as a launching off point if they make a fourth movie to go further into space and explore more of the universe that they've created.
I think that's very, very possible.
So
I agree with that, and I am going to bring your prediction one more forward.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Sonic CD, baby. Little Planet is going to be the next setting. That or Planet Wisp. One of the two. But I think Sonic CD because it'll let them bring Metal Sonic into it.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I think that Sonic CD is where they're going to go with this because, Little Planet actually is more terrestrial than Arc is in the Sonic series because it appears over a lake every 100 years or something. I don't know. The world of Sonic doesn't make any sense.
Insane.
But I think that they're going to go to another planet and they're going to, they could actually combine Planet Wisp with Little Planet. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be trying to free another planet, and Metal Sonic's going to be there. That's my prediction.
That's a very reasonably good prediction, and I think you are probably getting pretty close to it. You forget, though, that having a
is this turning into a debate? Sir, you forget.
Yes, it is, because you forget that Sonic the Hedgehog 3 looks like it's going to have Shadow, and it's going to be pretty cool. Uh-huh. If I'm being honest, it actually might be better than the first two if they pull off Shadow with any reasonableness. Which means the fourth one has to be where the series goes downhill, and they moops everything up, which is why Sonic the Hedgehog 4 will be about how he travels to space and then meets Amy, and it's a terrible rom-com about Sonic the Hedgehog and Amy.
Okay, but bringing it back around, sir, you forget, sir, that Amy was first introduced in Sonic CD.
That's true, so I guess we're both actually technically right if this happens. But why that's really a joke. Although I could see Hollywood studios really dropping the ball and making an entire movie about Sonic finding love, and that being where this series dies.
Well, I mean, the second movie is about him finding friends, so...
Right. It was him finding family, and then it was him finding friends, so maybe the next one is him finding love, which is where all of the children's series go to die. But my real legitimate prediction, and this is going to be a more, here's an Easter egg I believe will happen. I agree they will go to space, that they will meet other things in space, and that there will be not a full-on, plot point involving, but a subtle reference to a planet of chows. I believe we will see chows at some point in 4, but probably not, have them actually go to a chow planet.
Okay.
That's going to be my weirdly specific, guess about 4, is I agree about space travel, and chows will be around somewhere at some point.
There will be chows in space.
Chows in space.
Okay, well, this podcast looks like it's going to be about as long as the second movie. So I'm sorry, everyone, but this was a really good discussion. So, Nathan, where can people find you?
They can find me over on my YouTube channel, Nathan Blake Games. I've been posting very frequently over there. Recently got way back into it, so you can definitely find me there. And you can find me at Twitter at Nathan Blake Game. There's no S. One character too many. It's really sad. But anyway,
and it seems like Elon Musk is not going to fix it for us. So.
He's not going to fix it for us unless the lawsuit goes one way or the other, and then he does end up fixing it for us. But yeah, you can find me over on Twitter. I mostly talk about just whatever's on my mind or about my YouTube channel over there. Sometimes I tell jokes and stuff too. And then, yeah, on my YouTube, I play video games. I have a good time, and we talk about how games are art, and that art is important, so games are important. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And as always, you can follow us here at Two Button Crew on the by subscribing to the YouTube channel Two Button Crew. We are also on Twitter. We have a Facebook page as well, and we have a website, as I mentioned before, where we have plenty of blogs where I have written articles about Sonic Mania and why the Mean Bean Machine segment works but shouldn't. And also why Shadow the Hedgehog is not as much of a tired out cliche as you think he is. As well as you can, on our website, you can also download our My Adventure module, Expedition into the Howno Woods for the Legend of Zelda, the 1D4chan Legend of Zelda RPG system. It is 48 pages of content. It's kind of like a sandbox campaign. It's a really good introduction to the system. I tried to include at least an example of every mechanic I could in the game. So it helps tutorialize it, as well as offering various alternate rules and all of that stuff. And it is 100% free. So go check that out if you like tabletop RPGs. Also, we are always looking for new episode ideas. If there's an old classic game that you would like us to talk about, from NES to Switch, Wii U, whatever, just ask us about it. Or a more particular topic that's more general, like our discussions on how to manage backlog, or video games and movies. This is not our first time talking about video game movies, though we were looking at it more in aggregate last time. So if if you have anything like that, you can email me at glen@twobuttoncrew.com, and that's Glen with one N. Lastly, just thank you for listening to this very, very long podcast. Bye.
Sayonara! Watch Trigun. That's what I'm saying.